Welcome to the Celtic Way Morning Briefing Live. I'm Tony Haggerty. You know the drill by now, Haggerty10 Twitter handle. I'm joined as always by Sean Martin at Sean Martin DCW Twitter handle. And as you can see, we'll do the housekeeping, Sean, at the very beginning, as we always do. Running along the bottom, guys, as you can see, if you've not subscribed, please do. Just log on to www.celticway.co.uk/subscribe. Cost £1 for the first 2 months. You could also be in with a chance of winning a £100 gift card as well. Lots of great articles up there, stats, data analysis, you name it. Some contributions from myself and Sean and various other authors, and you'll enjoy the content, won't you, Sean?
Certainly will, especially if you like me ranting and raving about referees and stuff. I suppose that's if there's anything to go by.
Indeed. Now, I hope everybody's all right. Tuesday, fallout still after the Scottish Cup semi-final defeat. But Sean, going for some positive vibes today, aren't we? You got in touch with me earlier this morning and said that you're a glass half full kind of guy and it wasn't all doom and gloom, and so we'll try and spread that positivity to the listeners and viewers today. Now, you wanted to make a couple of comments about a couple of players who you thought did okay.
I am glass half full as long as the glass is half full of lager, I suppose. But it's I just figure we spent enough time yesterday going round the houses with the referee, with the performance in general being quite passive and all of that. But there were a couple of players I thought did play well, despite the result. And as I said yesterday, the perception of the result kind of sometimes spoils the overall perception of how individuals have played. I don't know what your thoughts on it were, but I thought Juranovic had a good game. And now I've found that with Juranovic, it doesn't even need to have such a good game for people to say he's had a good game, that kind of thing. He's got the benefit of the doubt to a massive extent a lot of the time, but not on Sunday. I thought he did have a good game, and I thought it was a genuine good game, not just a classy operator or that kind of good game. He actually did have a tangible good game, and you noticed when he went off, I thought that how well he actually had been playing. I don't know, do you agree with that? Do you think it was am I over-egging it?
No, I concur with that. I thought Celtic lost a wee bit of forward impetus when Juranovic went off, because he was getting forward to decent effect. And and I think he's produced such a high bar this season that you expect it now from him. And I just think I've been viewing social media. I know some of the reaction or overreaction from some Celtics is bordering on hysterical. Celtic were poor on Sunday. We get that. They didn't bring their A game to Hampden. They lost, and that's it. But it's gone. You move on. You can pick the bones out all you want, but I just think some of the reaction's been a bit, hysterical. They've lost. That's the first game they've lost in 34. So as I said yesterday, it's not all doom and gloom. And there's DS1 coming in with a comment, and I agree with that totally. Callum McGregor had a good game.
I thought Callum McGregor had a good game, but we obviously started with Juranovic here. To hit you with some stats before moving on to another player, it was Juranovic. Obviously, I'd done the data roundup on the website yesterday, so I had a wee look at the player stats, the gospel according to Y-Scout and all that. But Juranovic came out of the game with the highest passing accuracy, that award everybody always goes to. Of any Celtic player that played more than 10 passes. He won 10 of his 11 duels, 5 recoveries, 6 interceptions, 6 clearances. He only played 68 minutes, remember? And as I said in the ratings, and it says to you there, I think I felt you realised how well he had played when he went off, because Ralston struggled, to be honest, on the right in his stead. And that's not always been the case this season, I don't think. You could make the case a lot, and plenty of people in the comments have made the case over the course of the season that whether it be Juranovic switching to left all the time and stuff, Ralston hadn't been a dip. In some ways, he'd actually improved the production from right back when he'd played. But on Sunday, I thought he struggled, and I thought you noticed how well Juranovic had been playing, especially when he left.
Yep, I agree with that. I thought Ralston was left wanting a bit when he came on. Not his fault, just the way the game panned out in the end. But I thought he struggled badly too. And as you say, I thought it would normally just be a like for like, but on this occasion, it wasn't, and Ralston was poor, but he wasn't the only one.
It's not no fault apart from in the individual display. Obviously, it's not spoiling the season for him or anything. It was just I think that aided the kind of that aided how well Juranovic had played. Like,
Yeah.
Because Ralston came on and it wasn't seamless. And obviously later on he had to go to left back, and I actually think he played all right at left back compared to right back. And obviously Big Welsh had to play right back and hasn't done it since he was on loan at Morton, and it wasn't great for him. But I'd agree with DS1 that Cal McGregor had a good game. We were going to move on to him anyway, but I mean, again, for stats for McGregor, he got an assist for Greg Taylor's goal, 12 recoveries, half of which were in the Rangers half, which shows you that it wasn't all backs against the wall, despite what the narrative is for some quarters. He won half of his defensive duels. On that note, won half of his defensive duels, 2/3 of his offensive ones, which again, the narrative that John Lundstrom absolutely ran that midfield. It's a bit curious that that's the case then, isn't it? But few interceptions in there and a couple of clearances. But to be honest with McGregor, and I always feel this with McGregor, that there's certain players that there's always going to be an element of transcending statistics with the role that he plays. I think that is McGregor a lot of the time. Owen Brown on the website today has a piece basically all about that and how McGregor doesn't really fit into the kind of the pivot or the metronome kind of descriptions of somebody who supposedly sits at the base of midfield, because basically, as Owen puts it, he's constantly on the move. He can do it all. So the way that Owen kind of christened it in the article, was he called Carl McGregor a near irreplaceable unicorn? I think that probably suffices.
Yes, indeed. But I watched Callum McGregor have a good game on Sunday. I have to be honest. That's the game I watched. Lundstrom was there to blunt him. He did it to an effect because Rangers won the game, but I still thought Callum McGregor was Celtic's best player, or one of Celtic's better players on the day.
Yeah, I would probably give him a nod as the best Celtic player. I think, obviously, with the Lundstrom stuff, he was there to spoil, and he did that well in the sense that he never gets sent off or even booked for it. But it was when Rangers were kind of pressing high. It was Aribo, I think, that was mostly on McGregor. But that's for when they were pressing high. In open play, you've got to be looking at the Lundstrom factor and stuff, because as I said, half of McGregor's recoveries were in the opposition half, which is exactly where Lundstrom and Jack sit. So I think McGregor did have a decent game. It wasn't an all-time great game, but I think in the context of quite a passive display, he was the one certainly in the midfield, he was the one that was making the effort and kind of trying to drive him forward regardless of the kind of passivity and the kind of discombobulated press ahead of him and stuff. I says in the ratings, there was obviously those couple of moments where, like at the Ibrox game, he thought maybe the team run about him wasn't quite getting their head in the game, so he decided he would take the ball himself and run through half the team. Now, obviously, at Ibrox, none of the Rangers players stopped him. At Hampden, Joe Aribo pulled him down, which arguably they should have done at Ibrox, to be honest. Because it's not. I mean, that's a fair enough. That's a fair enough thing to do. But it's. I mean, I think he did a good game, Tony. I think you'd all agree with that.
Yeah. Just flick this one up, Sean, from Gary McDowell. Morning, guys. Signed up to Celtic Way last night. Really good articles, team. Keep them coming. Thanks very much, Gary. We appreciate anybody that subscribes and all our subscribers out there and regular viewers and listeners who comment.
Sorry, Tony, I've actually just got a text there from my uncle with breaking news that Hibs have sacked Sean Maloney.
Wow.
They have released a statement. I've got it in front of me here. Hibernian FC can confirm that Sean Maloney has departed the club as first team manager. Gary Caldwell and the backroom staff have also left with immediate effect. Executive Chairman, Ronald Gordon said, "Our hope in appointing Sean Maloney as a young, highly regarded coach was that he would help us take the club forward, but ultimately it didn't work out. We thank Sean and his coaching staff for all the hard work, wishing the best for the future." So David Gray will be taking charge as caretaker manager.
Wow. What do
you think of that, Tony? That's ex-Celtic player Sean Maloney, ex-Celtic coach Sean Maloney.
And a lot of Celtic supporters' eyes were on it to see how he did, because they thought that he would maybe be a future Celtic manager.
That's the way
I think that's been knocked on the head for the time being. But I guess Hibs are panicking because if they lose games, they could be dragged into that relegation dogfight. And
that's true, Tony. But I mean, you don't. They've said it themselves in the statement. I mean, and I realise this is what you're saying, but they've said that themselves in the statement that they're hoping appointing a young, highly regarded coach who would take the club forward. How did they expect him to do that in a matter of 3 months, 4 months?
Yeah,
and sack him without giving him a couple of transfer windows. I mean, that's a note, especially with a clearly defined way of playing football that he was trying to implement. You can't really judge that after this amount of time.
I'm not saying that he should be judged on that, but the problem is Hibs have made that judgment and they've hit the panic button and pulled the trigger because they're scared that they're going to get sucked into that dogfight at the bottom. And I agree with Arthur Taylor. If you appoint a young manager, that's what you want to do. You're looking at the future and you say, right, we'll go with you. You're our man. So they clearly appointed him with a wee bit of trepidation as well.
Must admit, I agree with Patrick. I know Hibs had went through a wee lull, but I didn't think that Jack Ross would have been sacked in the circumstances he was sacked either, to be honest. I agree with Patrick there, but nonetheless, when you saw that they got in Maloney, you thought, well, that's an interesting one because it's not only because of the Celtic factor, but because of the Belgian factor, because of the clearly defined principles that he was going to bring to the team and stuff. You thought, well, as you said, is that a future Celtic manager that we're watching going to Hibs?
That's why a lot of the Celtic supporters took a keen interest in it to see how he got on. But 4 months is, I mean, that is crazy. But that is a board that have just panicked.
I think so, and I think
looking up after the semi-final and they have panicked. Lost 2 in the spin to their rivals and thought, no good enough. We need to do something here. And it's always a manager that carries the can for that, isn't it?
It is. I mean, in the context, I'm not saying I watch Hibs every week or anything, obviously, but in the context, remember he's lost the top scorer. Kevin Nisbet's been out. Been out injured. They lost Martin Boyle, his best player. It's not an easy situation to get into, especially implementing a new style and arguably that the kind of main couple of defenders that he's got there maybe aren't really set for that style. But regardless, it's the same in terms of Ange Postecoglou. There's no point, like what people were suggesting earlier in the season, adapt your style because the players aren't there to play it now. If that's your style, you need to start implementing it. Whether the back line is capable of playing Maloney's style or not, the rest of the team won't all be leaving, if you know what I mean. So you need to implement the style as you want it. Right. But I mean, there's also the parallel there with Ange Postecoglou and the Celtic board not having that reactionary. I mean, obviously it wasn't quite dire straits like the way that Hibs can be painted at the moment, but it wasn't a great start from Ange. But by the time he got to 4 months in, it had started that it had arrested the kind of the perception. But regardless, does this not just reinforce the need for a board to be almost looking at a longer arc rather than simply what's in front of them at the moment?
Well, without a doubt. But I'll ask you this. Do you see Sean Maloney as someone who could add to Celtic's backroom team?
Without a doubt, I mean,
if Ange wanted him because he's worked with some of the best players in the world.
Without a doubt, I agree. I think that's a great shout. Whether he would want to come back and be part of the backroom staff again, I don't know. The fact that he's had a taste of first team management maybe means that he's going to hold out for something later on and back the charge.
Given what he was trying to implement at Hibs, which was similar to what, because Hibs were playing the ball out from the back and stuff like that, and that kind of methodical process. So I watched it and I thought, okay, is he somebody who could probably bounce well off Ange? And maybe because he bounced well off Roberto Martinez, maybe he is an assistant coach. Maybe that is his role.
But he's. I mean, I
know he's had a taste of it. And he's been a manager and get burned by that. But I'm just saying, maybe some people are natural assistants in number 2.
Oh no, I agree with that. But I think it's maybe
just as valuable. But
I agree. I think it's too young, too early in Maloney's kind of managerial career to say maybe fits into that category now, because he's, as David Gillespie put it, with the 4 months is nowhere near enough time. He's not really had enough time to show what he can be as a manager. So I think I think he would add to the backroom staff. I don't know if that's something that would be in the offing or not, but I think he would add to Celtic's backroom staff, especially with Ange and the kind of principles that he would be putting in place. On top of the fact that he was a highly rated coach anyway, as you say.
Yeah, of course. That's another thing.
I mean, it's the same. Remember, I was talking to you and Alison about Scott Brown and about having had that kind of taste of first team coaching, that you might not really want to go to a youth coach again, to be a youth coach again, that kind of thing. There's almost the same logic with Maloney. Maybe because he's had a taste of first team management, he won't want to just directly go back into a backroom staff. But you never know.
If I was bringing Maloney back, I would only bring him back as an assistant to Ange Postecoglou. I wouldn't offer him a youth team role, and I'd put
Aye,
him straight on first team, helping Ange if that was possible. So
right, I think fair enough, Charlie. Yes, move on. This is a Celtic page, not a Hibs one. Fair enough. Prefer this comment. Spot on, lads.
just a bit of breaking news, Charlie. We just discussed it because there was a Celtic connection there. That was all.
Yep.
Now,
so sorry, we talked about McGregor, didn't we?
We did indeed.
I think it's also worth noting that his insistence that the team come over for a huddle after the game probably just reinforces that role that he's embraced as a leader and stuff. But is there any other players, Tony, that stood out to you in that game that in a positive manner?
You told me off air that statistically Cameron Carter-Vickers, it was one of his worst performances, but I actually thought they did okay. And Cameron Carter-Vickers shot off the crossbar away from possibly securing a place in the final. But I still thought that him and Starfelt were decent because I don't think Roof get much change out of them. But again, the stats can be manipulated to suit. But on the eye test, for me, I thought Cameron Carter-Vickers did well, which then led me on to the bigger question, which I'm just about to throw at you, Sean. There's a real debate going on now. Cameron Carter-Vickers or Jota? If you could sign one, who would it be? And that narrative's flipped a wee bit from earlier in the season, hasn't it? I think a lot of Celtic would now say Cameron Carter-Vickers is a must, and Jota is somebody who they could move on without. Although I think most supporters would want them to sign the two of them. But if you could only get one, would it be Cameron Carter-Vickers?
Well, David Bradley right away saying yes, Tony.
Oh, there you go.
Is that where you stand on it just now, Tony? You
I think looking at it, yeah, I was a Jota man. You know how much and how highly I rate Jota, but I just think that the spine of your team is where it's all happening. We've got the goalkeeper right. I think Cameron Carter-Vickers is imperative moving forward. We've got like McGregor in the middle. We've got like Jackie Marcus or Kyogo up front. So that kind of, I would be more worried if we lose out in Cameron Carter-Vickers than I would have been had we lost Jota. I think Jota's a wonderfully skillful player who can turn matches, but I just think recently it's been too infrequent, and I'm still waiting for him to step up in, a game like Sunday. Yeah, I would agree with that. I really expected a big performance from Jota on Sunday, and I never got it. I felt disappointed again in a big game.
Aye, I mean,
you said he didn't. You say you thought he didn't play particularly badly, but
no, not as badly as what people are making now.
I'm looking for a wee bit more.
I think Abada was a lot worse on the other end.
Expect
more from Jota, maybe. I think now we've got the benefit, right, of doing both the opinion and the analysis on the website. So I will point out that both of them have topped their power rankings this season. Statistically, obviously, both have been standouts. Jota was top of their power rankings, which isn't obviously that one's not scientific in the sense it's just collating our throughout the season. So it's reflective of what we see rather than the statistics underneath it or anything. But there's plenty of the statistics online as well. Jota topped it before the winter break. Carter-Vickers is top of it now in the most recent update, but they were still the top two. So although the absolutely unplayable Jota of earlier in the season isn't there every game now, and I don't think it's been there every game for a while, I still think there's been a bit of an overreaction as to how bad he's been for me. The greedy accusation, which has been levelled at him quite a bit, I think that could have been levelled at him at any point over the past 7 months. The reason it's made so often now is because stuff's not coming off for him. It's just that he's just that wee bit less effective. But even that, I mean, you've got to remember, this is essentially his first full season at top level senior football. So maybe that's to be expected. He wasn't playing a lot before his loan move to Parkhead. So maybe it's a bit of a reality check for some that early season form wasn't going to be sustainable. Certainly not to the kind of production level that he was putting out earlier in the season. I still think game by game, he doesn't hide. He wants the ball. Maybe the greedy aspect, as I say, you can level that at him, but I think you could level that at him earlier in the season as well. The shooting is the one I would say. I think he blazes a lot over the bar. I think Ryan Christie got a lot of flack for that. So I think if Jota does stay and that continues to be a feature of his game, you probably see that next season becoming a consistent criticism. But I think overall, surely a dip was always going to be on the cards, given what I said about the the fact this is his first full season at top level senior football. As always, I've got the stats there. So he played 710 minutes for Benfica, top level football, 2019-20. Played 782 minutes for Valladolid in Spain last season. Now, just because you know I like to do this, those minutes equate to around 8 or 9 full games in total over the 2 seasons, right? So 8 or 9 games the first season, 8 or 9 games last season. This season he's played nearly 3,000 minutes, which is equivalent to about 32 matches. So I think it was probably always going to be the case that he had a dip. That it's at the end of the season rather than at the start, obviously doesn't help the perception. And you have got a point that the bigger games he's maybe not done it.
I'm not having in any shape or form. I think he's a sublimely talented footballer when he's on it. I just think at this moment in time, Cameron Carter-Vickers in that position and central defence is imperative for Celtic to sign him moving forward.
David Bradley saying it's the hard yards he means with the hardwares, but I disagree with that. His pressing stats and his effort off the ball isn't in question to me. I think he does it. I don't think that's a fair criticism.
Opinion, Sean.
Patrick McLaughlin making the case he's shifted all over the park. He's been switched from right to left. I think he's actually, again, there's a bit of recency bias there because I think he played well against St Johnstone. I think he played well before that as well. But as you said, Tony, it was a big game, and that obviously has more of a spotlight on it.
I just feel that in some of the big games, not all of them, he's been found wanting a wee bit. And maybe Celtic supporters are expecting more from him. I know I am expecting big game players to turn up on the big stage. And I thought Sunday was one of those. It was a big stage, and we needed him to perform, and he didn't. He just fell below that. You thought he played okay, but okay is okay. He wasn't the match winner, and I'm looking at him as a potential match winner. And also, you mentioned Abada too. I'm looking for both of them to step up to the plate in the absence of Giakoumakis, who I think they missed badly on Sunday. But that's another thing. But if you're talking about, for me, I think the narrative has really switched. For 12 million quid, I think it's a good investment if you can secure the two of them. But if you can only secure one, I think Celtic's priority right now is making sure they secure Cameron Carter-Vickers. Just my own opinion, and I think there'll be life without Jota. I think it'd be difficult to get someone of Carter-Vickers quality for that money. That's what I'm saying.
That's the question I'm actually going to ask for comments on specifically. The question is for me: do you think it'd be easier to find another Jota or to find another Carter-Vickers? Because I'm interested what people think. Because I think earlier in the season the answer would have been Jota.
Of course.
And I still think you make a case that for the respective attributes, it probably is Jota that you couldn't find another one of. But given Celtic, and I think there was a comment back here Patrick put up. There it's there. Given the fact that it's Celtic specifically rather than just the individual players and their attributes and their potential ceilings, centre-back has been a position that's been a problem more arguably than out wide, isn't it?
Which is my thinking. You need that spine of the team to function. And you've got the goalkeeper right, Cameron Carter-Vickers, Starfelt. I think that's right. And keep Vickers and keep McGregor. You've got, Kyogo, Giakoumakis, anyone from 2. You've got a decent front line there. So I just think that when that functions, I think you're halfway there to becoming a successful team.
On Carter-Vickers, I'm not saying I would definitely take Jota or whatever. Obviously, I'm greedy. I said it with the trophies. You want both, don't you? But
of course.
As I say, Carter-Vickers top 2 power rankings. I think deservedly so because he's been pretty much a model of consistency, and it's not been consistency of the 6 and 7 out of 10 variety. He gets 8s. He gets 8s a lot from us.
Cameron Carter-Vickers 8, as he's
that's the addendum to his name. I mean, he's chipped him a few goals too as well. And although he wasn't renowned for it beforehand, he has shown a bit of an aptitude for playing that kind of riskier pass when it's on as well. He has been superb. I mean, to be honest, and you kind of referenced it already, that I'd mentioned to you off air, that we're sitting here 2 days removed from statistically one of it was kind of a poorer display. He won only 29% of his headers against Rangers, which was a bit of a giveaway that it wasn't a great game from him. It's way below his usual. He's usually up near 70%. I mean, he had a couple of hairy moments on top of that. You mentioned if he if it hits the net rather than the bar, then your perception again changes. He wasn't awful, not at all, but by his own standards, it wasn't a great game from him. Now, again, I used this phrase earlier. That's a bit of recency bias to even consider it for this topic, because it's not really relevant when you're talking about the season as a whole and whether you sign him or not. And I think overall he's been unbelievable, and I'm not surprised that the narrative has changed to Carter-Vickers over Jota.
Patrick coming in here, sorry. I don't think I wanting Jota exiled from the team, Patrick. We were just asking a question if you were to sign one or t'other, if that's a rhetorical question, not rhetorical, the question I'm asking, if you could only choose one, would it be CCV or Jota? And I'm saying the narrative has switched. I've just said Jota's a highly skillful player and he could easily score 2 or 3 on Sunday. I just think some of the bigger games this season, Jota has failed to be that player that I think every Celtic supporter believes he is and thinks he is. That's just my opinion.
His return is still, it's still impressive. 10 goals, 11 assists. And as I say, the game time equivalent's about 32 matches. That's a good return from a winger. Caveat being that the bulk of those goals and assists were before the winter break, I think, because when he was top of the power rankings, I think he was at 7 goals, 7 assists or something. It's not been quite as up there with his production level, but I think, as I say, I think that was to be expected. It's still a very, very good return. But
let me say this: I want to sign both of them. I want to sign both of them. Right, okay. Right, no worries, Patrick. But yeah, and I get where you're coming from on that. I've seen a lot of that, but I do want to sign both of them because I think they will enhance the team. I'm just making the point that if we have to sign one, then who would it be? And I think at this minute, the narrative's changing that before it would have been Jota hands down. Now I think it's switched to Cameron and Carter-Vickers. That's all, yeah.
Interesting. Are you suggesting Sean Maloney gets drafted in?
Yes, indeed. Well, you know what? I don't think it's the worst suggestion ever for that to happen, but I don't make these decisions. It's over to the powers that be that make these kind of decisions, but it's not the worst call, is it?
No.
Having watched the way Hibs have been trying to play under Maloney, that's all. So now, Sean, there's something else happening today, isn't there?
There is, not far away, aye.
Was it? 11 o'clock, half an hour. There'll be a vote on VAR, whatever way you want to pronounce it or say it. And the Scottish clubs are all having their say on that, Sean. We know most of the top, I think every top flight club is for it. Now, remind us of the rules again, Sean. What do they need to see this over the line?
Well, the vote is at 11 or so, but so we don't know that the top flight clubs are all going to vote for it. But there was a report in the Record today suggesting all 12 have intimated that they are going to vote in favour of it. They need for VAR to get the green light, it would need 75% of the Premiership teams, 75% of the Championship teams, but then 75% of combined League 1 and 2 to vote in favour of it. And yes, that's even though it's only the top flight that will be using it. Which me and Alison spoke about last week. That was a wee bit odd, but to be fair, in a pyramid system, which it is now, it would affect any club that get promoted all the way up in theory. So it's not as daft as it sounds to include all these clubs, even though the voting structure for the League 1 and League 2 is a bit odd anyway. But that's what it needs to get approval. It would come into effect the second half of next season. So when they break for the World Cup, it would be implemented after that when they resume. Stephen McGowan in Mailsport last week reported that the SPFL were looking for sponsorship to help with the cost of it. As far as I'm aware, they've not announced a sponsorship's been met. They might announce that later. It might just not have been found. If it hasn't been found, clubs will have to pay for it all, and that could lead Celtic to getting hit with a bill for about 200,000. And then that trickle, assuming Celtic win the league, obviously, and that trickles right down to clubs that finish 11th and 12th, where it would be around 67,000. So that's the state of play getting into the vote. It could be that by the end of lunchtime today, you might know that VAR's going to be in Scottish football.
Do you agree with that, Sean? Do you want to see VAR introduced into Scottish football?
I said previously that I don't mind it. I think the technology is generally sound. I would imagine, and it's not even imagining because we spoke about it last week, me and Alison, and there was plenty of comments. backing up the perception that I had, which would be that most people's concern would be those operating it. The fact that refs in Scotland, I don't even mean that as a dig. I just mean in general that they're not full time, which is another consideration. And I think it's almost typical Scottish football to do it their own way around, where you think full time refs should preempt VAR rather than the other way about. I think if VAR gets put in place, it needs to be the first step to putting refs full time. It needs to be a career for people rather than a side job, that kind of thing. There's also one-off costs you've got to remember of setting up a VAR hub like the Stockley Park one down south. It's meant to be around 400,000. So there's all these different costs, and if they don't get sponsorship, it's all right saying Celtic 200,000, because although Celtic would be hit with the biggest bill if they win the league, Celtic are also in a better position to afford that. The kind of smaller clubs, are they? I don't know if that's the case. What they would be wanting to spend that on. That's players' wages, X amount of players' wages for a year, for a season. It could be the difference between staying up and stuff. So there's things there that still don't quite sit right. And I think that Patrick makes a comment here, which is actually one that my mate says to me yesterday when we were talking about VAR. And I'm interested to see what you think, Tony, does implementing VAR halfway through a season almost compromise the integrity of a season, because you're going to have it for the second block of games but not the first block?
Yeah, I don't understand that thinking or logic. If you're going to introduce it, then you introduce it from the start of a season, not halfway through a competition, because everyone will, in that half season that's happened before, everyone will point to various decisions that VAR would have overturned or whatever. So it would have to come in surely at the start of a season. I would be very, I don't know. I don't think that sits well with most football supporters, does it? Coming in halfway through a season.
I don't think so. What I would argue is, well, it's got to come in sometime.
Yeah, I get that.
But I do question the logic of introducing it halfway through the season. It is, again, maybe typical Scottish football to do something that doesn't really need to be done that way. On the other hand, it is an extended break for the World Cup, so it's almost like they're maybe seeing it as a clearly defined break when to put it in after it. But again, it is halfway through a season, no matter what way you look at it.
Yeah, and I just think the logic in that strikes me as you say, it's kind of upside down, isn't it, or back to front? So
I mean, Ben, with the thing here, and this is what you hear down south all the time, that the technology is there, but the ref can still interpret it. But I mean, I think that's fair enough. I mean, that's a fair enough argument to make. Ultimately, some of these things still will come down to interpretation regardless. So the VAR is there mostly to aid those decisions in theory, rather than to necessarily make it 100%. It's not going to be.
My overarching point or thought on it is that if the technology's there, it gets more right than it gets wrong, doesn't it? Statistically.
I think so.
So I think you have to implement it and bring it in, but it's not going to stop the wide-ranging debate over decisions, which will always be contested, regardless of whether they go when they go for or against you. That's the whole point, isn't it? You know, so it's.
I agree. I can see the criticism. I think it's almost it's a bit of that word again. I like to use it. I used with you last week talking about Celtic. A bit of modernisation doesn't go amiss, but obviously it's got to be put in place with a coherent plan, and arguably at the right time, whether you think that's the right time or not. And then obviously, as I say, the fact that refs aren't full time to me is a sticking point. I think it might be a sticking point I've got to make my peace with, because it's not going to be that they make refs full time and then implement VAR if VAR's going to be in from the middle of next season. It's not going to be the case. Even if the VAR officials, which I think they probably will be full time, that doesn't stop the fact that the matchday referees aren't full time. There's no joined up thinking there for me. But I think I might have to make my peace with that and just concede that is the way around that Scottish football is going to do it. Because eventually refs are going to have to be full time for me. It's not a point of debate. I think that has to be the case.
Well, from 11 o'clock or lunchtime, as you say, the picture will become clearer, and I think we're heading down the introduction of VAR to Scottish football line to bring us into line with most other leagues in Europe. I would be very surprised if this was rejected. Would you not, Sean?
Probably, I think so. I think it's the money that's the sticking point for a lot of clubs, because, again, it's all well saying Celtic, 200,000, which is still obviously proportionate to the league, which is disproportionately hit. But it's easier for Celtic to afford that than it is for smaller clubs, and that goes a longer way for smaller clubs. So we'll see if that bears fruit with it, or if it's simply the principle of getting VAR in is what trumps it. They might announce a sponsor, we don't know. They've not announced it yet. So
yeah, we shall reconvene on that, Sean. And
Yep.
on that note, we'll end today's broadcast. Hope been a bit more positive for the Celtic supporters. Still got a lot to look forward to, and yeah, we'll crank it up before Dingwall on Sunday. Big game for Celtic coming up, Sean.
Yep.
And of course, guys, you know what to do. Hit that subscribe button if you've enjoyed today. Other days like it, you'll see lots of stats, data analysis, and stuff on the website that's interesting for every Celtic supporter.
Yep.
Subscribe to the Celtic Way. It costs £1 for the first 2 months, and you just log on to www.celticway.co.uk/subscribe. And we always appreciate the people that do it, and we always appreciate the comments in the comment section and the viewers and listeners.
Yep.
So thanks a lot. Have a wonderful day, guys. Sean, thanks for your contribution. Top notch as always.
Cheers, Tony. Cheers, Trips.